Who would I be if I chose none?
Okay, we are on the air. We are on the air with our May 5th work session. Councilor Stavengard is with us online. And I think we're all a little punchy after an all-day budget meeting on Saturday. But our first topic today is solid waste rate review, and that'll be kicked off by our Finance Director, Michael Osborne.
Thank you, Mayor. This is part of our ongoing fee schedule conversations that we've had over the last month. Today, the topic is solid waste rates and recycling, and the city partners with Chris Bell of Bell and Associates to go through and do an analyze the rates. So with that, I will introduce Chris Bell. Chris, are you there?
Yes, Don, I'd love to go in. Thank you for reaching my firm to do this work for the city. I greatly appreciate the trust that you've given me and my colleague to review this stuff. And again, it's good working with both of the primary collection companies that operate within the city of Milwaukie, Waste Management, Waste Connections. And hopefully there's representatives there from both the companies to answer any questions specifically related to garbage collection. So every year that this is an annual process that's pretty unique within the state of Oregon, specifically within the Portland metropolitan area, where the haulers generate a report that presents the financial outcome of operations within the franchise area. And this report has financial results, it has customer data, and a lot of other information necessary to determine whether the rates are adequate to return a rate of return that's within the franchise agreement for the haulers. And so this year, Michael, can you go to the next page, please? On that report, Waste Management, Waste Connections, and Waste Connections, the company that they're operating is K-Hoot. And the reason they do this is primarily when they acquire a company, they like to keep it a local company. In this case, they retain the name. So it's K-Hoot and it's Waste Management. And Clackamas Garbage does have a small piece of Milwaukie, but it's so small that it doesn't have an impact. They still report, but we don't include those results on the rate setting. So just to clarify, that's why they're listed on the sheet. In 2025, there was some increase in residential residential customers, as well as commercial container customers compared to the previous year. And this right here is the layout of how many customers are currently being provided service within the city of Milwaukie, both residential, which is primarily a cart, a container, commercial container, which is the front load, a container for the bigger volumes of waste, and then drop-box and compactor hauls. And the interesting thing about Milwaukie is you do have an industrial area that's very robust for the size of the city, and there are a lot of hauls out of that specific area. Next slide, please. And this right here is kind of the franchise makeup of the city, and you can see it's broken out in two parts. Waste Management does have the southern part of the city, whereas K-Hoot does have the northern part, the brown area shaded in. And Clackamas Garbage just had a small piece down in the southeast portion of town.
So it's labeled Hood View on your map, but K-Hoot and Hood View are the same thing?
And Waste Connections.
And Waste Connections.
Waste Connections bought K-Hoot, K-Hoot bought Hood View. Did I get that right?
Okay.
No, K-Hoot bought, oh shoot, I forget the name of the two guys a long time ago, and then they named it Hood View. And then it was Hood View, and it was K-Hoot, it was Candy Disposal. It was 3 different companies.
Okay.
And then Hood View bought out, this was 2 others. This was the Diamonds Brothers franchise area. So it's kind of convoluted, but right now it's Waste Connections. So one of the things that we're looking at this year, as we're looking at the cost increases year to year, one thing that's been going on for the last 5 or 6 years, we've seen a significant rate increase in disposal fees, and this year was no difference. We have a 9% increase in disposal fee, which doesn't seem like a lot until you look at the rate that's being charged right now for disposal, and it's significant. It does have a significant impact on customer service, the customer rates that are being charged. Union driver wages are up a little higher this year, and there's kind of a catch up. And so we've seen 3 to 3.5%, in this case 3.86% for the union agreement between Waste Management and the Teamsters. And we use that as a means for escalating labor. KHOOT right now is a non-union company. However, even though they're non-union, they still have to pay wages that are commensurate with the union. They still have that competitive, labor is still competitive, and labor does flow to the highest payer. So in this case, they do have to, even though they're not union, they still have to maintain union wages. And then the other thing that we're seeing an increase is the increase in disposal fee for residential organic waste, which is the combination of yard debris and food waste. And again, that's going up by 10% from 100 to 110. And both the garbage and the organic materials the garbage is taken either to Metro South, which is in Oregon City, or KHOOT does take it down to their transfer station down in Canby. And then organic waste is taken to Metro South. They do take organic food waste. So these are the 3 primary rate increases that we're going to be pushing through in the rate for the current year. Next slide, please. And so this is the proposed residential collection rate. You can see the 3 costs of those additional increases would be the current rate, we have the disposal fee, and it varies from the size of the container, and it's based on the weight, the average weight of that container. Organics is the same for everybody because they have the same size of container, and so we can't differentiate between one side of town and the other, so it's the same rate for everybody. And labor is the same thing, it's the same cost, whether you're picking up a smaller cart or a larger cart. Labor is still flat across the board. So the combination of those 3 costs for the 35-gallon cart, which is the most common level of service within the city of Milwaukie, we're going to see an increase of $1.67, or in this case, 4% increase over the current rates.
So just to be clear, like for the 35-gallon, the disposal fee increase of 88 cents, that's the increase. That's not the total of that disposal fee, right?
Correct. Correct. The disposal fee, if you were to take that $177, there's, I can calculate it here and tell you what the average, what within that rate that you're paying for disposal, effectively do a breakout if the city council wants that, what comprises there, that 4385, I can tell you, what the costs are that comprise that 4385. And it's due to the level of information that's being provided by Waste Management and Waste Connections with their annual reports.
So can I ask, well, I guess I'll hold it till you're done.
Go ahead, I like it. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, so we had a 4% increase last year as well.
Mm-hmm.
But your report told us we actually saved 170,000 something
Yes.
because of the waste, whatever it's called, Reduction Act.
Yeah, the Recycling Management Act, or excuse me, right, Recycling Modernization Act.
Yeah.
And then the Recycling Modernization Act is, the way that it's set up is the burden of paying for the recycling, processing, and everything else within the state is shifting from ratepayers to the generators of the material. So for example, let's use Pepsi. Pepsi generates, produces a product that's put in plastic bottles. And so Pepsi is paying a dollar amount per unit that's sold within the state of Oregon to the Circular Action Alliance, which is the operator of the PRO. And I can explain a lot more detail, but in essence, Pepsi, all the other manufacturers of packaging are paying into this organization. And this organization is now paying for the processing of the recycling in that state. So the shift of that is moving from the ratepayer to the producer and consumer.
Yeah, and I thought that was awesome. I mean, I think, the whole producer responsibility mantra, I'm on board for that. So it's great that comes out of our rates, but it's not enough to make much difference.
Well, the other thing too, that it did make a difference. What you're not seeing here is there were significant increases from 24 to 25 for the cost of the trucks. The cost of a garbage truck has gone up significantly. I think it's increased about 7.5% over the last 10 years annually for the cost of the garbage truck. That was up significantly. The cost of repair and maintenance is up significantly also. The cost of insurance is going up. And so those are three costs off the top of my head that I can recall that were significantly higher this year than last year. So that reduction in expense for processing recycling was offset by those increased costs for insurance, for truck repair, truck replacement, other costs that were increasing from 24 to 25. So it did have an impact, because if we didn't have that, there'd be another approximately $150,000 in the rates that we'd have to account for. And so the rate increase would be significantly higher than the 4% that we're doing right now.
I just have a quick question. Just in your expertise, and maybe it's just me looking at these numbers, but it just seems like the difference in the cost from like a 20 gallon to a 96 gallon, which is almost 5 times as much, it's not even double what the fee is. So, and that's a significant difference in trash. So I'm just curious, like, it's almost like there's a little bit of subsidizing going on from the lower end trash users?
No.
Or
interestingly enough, you look at the volume of the card, and the volume of the card we're not paying for the volume, we're paying for the weight of the material. And so every year, the city of Portland goes out and they weigh these containers. They have a group of kids from Portland State University that run out every day during a period 4 times a year. They weigh these carts, these roll carts, and they have weights specifically for a 32, a 20, 64, and a 96 gallon. And the weight on those the weight is heavier per unit, per gallon, for a 20 gallon than it is for 96. The reason is because even though most people that have a 96, may need it, there's still some volume, there's still some air that they don't fully utilize that container. Whereas the 32 gallon, those people are probably using it to the advantage. You probably lift the lid, you're not going to see a lot of volume in there, a lot of air. But the bigger the container, the more air it is, more air it has in it. The average weight that we use for the 35 gallon cart is just under 24 pounds per setup. That means that cart weighs about 24 pounds when you roll it out, the average weight when you roll it out to the curb. But when you look at that 60 gallon cart, you think, okay, it's going to be almost double. It's 40 pounds. So it's 15 pounds difference. So the difference between the 64 and the 35 gallon is 15 pounds. That's the difference in the rate that you're seeing right there, at $1.50 to 88 cents. And so in the 96 gallon cart, the average weight on that is 58 pounds. And so we set the rate based on those averages.
So, sorry, Mary. So somebody with a 96 gallon bin isn't necessarily using all 96?
Correct.
But they're paying for it.
They're paying for it.
So I will say back
But they
in,
pay for it because they might need it periodically,
Yeah, I get that.
I was gonna say back in
Right there.
probably, a year or two before the pandemic, back in the late teens, former Mayor Gamba really, we kind of drilled down on this question and wanted to have the rates be more lower
More
for
equitable.
the smaller and higher for the bigger, and have more of a gap in those. I don't know if we've got the right one now. I do seem to recall from last year when we were comparing rates across other, cities like Oswego and West Lynn and stuff. I feel like you called them one or two cities out for having really done that, for having really put heavier charges on the larger bins. Am I right about that?
I can't recall, because it's pretty standard for the cities to compare rates.
Yeah.
Well, I do remember when the mayor went out, and Dean Camper was with Waste Management, they went out and they looked at cans and carts. They walked the neighborhood, because Mark was concerned that people with big containers were throwing away, they weren't recycling. What he found out was just the opposite, that people with larger carts were actually recycling as much or more, and doing it well. And his concern was that he didn't want to see garbage, or he wanted to see recycling in the recycling carts. So I think, if I recall correctly, he was pleasantly surprised at what he found during his walk around looking lids. My personal opinion is, I would rather have the rate on a 96 be affordable than punitive, because the one thing that people don't realize is, if you get a 35-gallon cart, and you got 60 gallons worth of garbage, and you got this 64 or 96 gallon cart for recycling, and you run out of volume for your garbage, where do you think that garbage is gonna go? Because people aren't gonna sit on it for a week. They're gonna put it in a recycling cart, they're gonna put it in a yard debris cart. So my opinion is, give them the capacity to throw garbage in the garbage container and throw recycling in the recycling container. And if you teach, and you're always gonna have the exception, we're not gonna do it or gonna contaminate it. But for the most part, if you explain, here's what I want you to put in the recycling, the yard debris, and the garbage, 90% of the people are gonna comply with that. They're gonna look at it, they're gonna make that change. So, and we did this a couple years ago. We changed the rates in Tiger. We went from that huge delta between the containers. And so if you look at the rates in Tiger, they're pretty close by. A lot of people went from the 35-gallon to the 64-gallon, and we were hoping to see a change in the contamination. The problem is, we didn't have enough information, and we didn't run enough routes, and then the pandemic hit, to really find that, to make that determination. But again, I would, my personal opinion is, I would rather people get a bigger container and throw their garbage in a garbage container than somewhere else.
Well, that's a valid point. I could see that.
The other thing too, I don't believe, how many.
We don't have a lot of the people with the 96, right? Can you give us a breakdown?
I'm gonna give that to you right here. The number of people right now in the 96-gallon cart throughout the city, let's see here, it is 375.
So that's like 2%.
Yeah, it's not a
Because
lot.
it's 6,000 total.
Yeah, most of your customers are 35 gallon carts.
Other thoughts, other questions? Counselor Stavenjord, anything from you?
Yeah, a couple extra slides too.
Okay, sorry, yeah,
Yeah.
there's more than just residential. Yeah, sorry.
The other change is the increase for Dropbox, and for that we're requesting a couple changes. We're increasing the haul fee for $2 based on the labor increase. And so you're gonna see, I apologize here, because it says current rate 181, rate increase $2, it should be 183, 193, 203, 223, 253 on that proposed rate. So it should be, the $2 to $3 higher, and I apologize for that oversight. But the two big changes here is the increase in the delivery fee.
Yeah.
When we were looking at the average time, the average haul time, to go from point A to point B, to bring a box to the customer, we initially set the rate assuming a 20-minute turnaround time, and the turnaround time is significantly higher. It's around 40 minutes to get a box, take it to the customer, place it, and you go on. And so this increase in delivery fee from 48 to 95 represents the additional time necessary to get that box and place it to the customer. And not only are you placing the box at the customer, there's also, depending on the situation, a lot of times these are residential homes, And so there's a placement in the box, there may be a waiver that has to be signed if they're gonna be utilizing the driveway. There may be a place that has to be moved or cleared out to accommodate that box. So it's not just there necessarily getting the box there, dropping it off and leaving. There's some other additional time expended by the driver to place that box. And then the other change that we were requesting is the decrease in the trip time or the allowable fee assessment for mileage. So a significant portion of the hauls take place from the industrial area to Hillsborough landfill. These are special boxes and special wastes that have to be delivered out there. And so initially it was 18 miles, and as we were looking at the numbers, we'd like to reduce it from 18 miles to 12 miles. I'd like to keep the mileage rate the same, but decrease by 6 miles to 12. And so those are the three primary changes that we're requesting for Dropbox service.
What does that do essentially? Like, what was the reason for lowering it 6 miles? How did you guys get to 6 miles?
Additional drive time, the congestion, the distance. Even though the one thing that we're seeing is the Dropbox is primarily a time and distance. So the average run cost for a Dropbox, looking at Milwaukie, is around 125 an hour to run that truck. And so when we put the mileage fee in place a couple of years ago, because it didn't make sense to have a huge rate for the in-town box haul. So for example, if you're a homeowner and you wanted to get a temporary box for a clean out, you know, the average turnaround time in Milwaukee is pretty quick because the transfer stations at Metro South, it's right there at Oregon City. And so to pick up the box, dump it, and get back doesn't take a lot of time. So utilizing an average rate based on those hauls to Hillsborough landfill didn't make sense. So what we did is we assessed that mileage fee to capture that additional drive time from Milwaukie to distant landfills or to other facilities outside of Milwaukie. So for example, there was some special loads that were taken back to Central. There was some loads that were taken to Greenway, which is by Metro Central. And so the drive time to get from point A to point B is increased because of the traffic. And so this is a means to increase the rate without increasing the overall rate to account for those distance or that additional drive time associated with traffic outside the city of Milwaukee.
How much is it over 12 miles?
It's $5.25 a mile after 12.
You're
And that comes from the point of pickup to the point of disposal.
So it's not charged at all if it's within 12 miles?
Correct.
There's not a mileage
Correct.
charge. There's a delivery fee, but there's not a mileage charge.
Correct. That mileage assessment takes place from the point of picking up the box to the final destination. And so they, for example, I think Waste Management has a little calculator that says this, I think it's 32.2 miles from Precision Gas Parts to Hillsborough landfill. And so when I looked at their mileage, it was dead on. They had, I think, 2,200 hauls last year, times 32.5 times $5, and the dollar amount was exactly that. So they were charging it, that difference, that 32 less 18 was the mileage charge.
So I guess
So again, it's charged after mile 12.
my concern about the drop to 12 miles is I think that is going to rope in the drops to Metro South. Because I think Metro South is probably, from at least substantial parts of Milwaukee, is probably right around 12 miles round trip.
Okay, so then, for your concern then, because I have the same concern. If we do that, map that out from the farthest point in the city to Metro South, if it's greater, whatever that distance is, if it's longer than that, then would you support a rate that says anything beyond that? And here's the other caveat that I share with you. I would use it to the closest facility that can accept that waste. So for example, If you were to collect garbage, in Milwaukie and take it to Metro South, that's the closest facility. However, both Waste Management and KU also have their own transfer stations. So, and usually when I see this, we make this adjustment. If they wanted to take it to, let's say, Troutdale or to Candy and drive past Metro South, the rate's not going to support it, and the additional mileage should be charged. So the way it should read is to the closest permitted facility. If the hauler wants to take it somewhere else, then the hauler bears the burden of that additional cost.
Right, well, that makes sense, yeah.
Chris, could you clarify? So if you go 13 miles under this proposed rate, do you pay $5.25 or do you pay 13 times $5.25?
The way I see it, you pay $5.25.
Okay.
But we can check that and find out what they're charging.
So would that be a total of $10.50? Because it's 13 miles, you're paying $5.25 for the 12, and then you're paying an extra $5 for the other mile, right?
No, so that's what I was asking. He says you only pay past 12.
Right, so if you go 13.
You would pay $5.25. You have 13 minus 12 times 5.5.
12 miles are free.
I got it, right.
Yeah.
So to keep it at 18 miles, what would the change in the mileage fee had to have been? Was it that big of was it a big jump?
No, I don't think so.
Well, then,
Good point. Let's see here. That's
what? I got it down.
As Chris does that map, I just went in and put some addresses into Milwaukie just to see the Metro South. From here, it's about 6.5 miles. From the
Round
top
trip?
of 30, no, just one way. To the top of Johnson Creek, or 32nd by Johnson Creek is 8.5 miles. So it looks like it's under. I also just drew a circle around and it falls as the crow flies well within 12 miles. But your question is fair. Is it round trip or is it just one way?
It's good to be round trip.
Yeah, that's what I thought he said too, is round trip. You're not just,
so it's one way.
oh, it's one way, okay.
One way, yeah. No, it's not round trip.
That's good.
Yeah. And the reason it's not round trip is because typically, if the dispatch is good, that box is dumped, and then it's taken to another location, another couple to needs it, right? Or it's taken back to the yard.
Well, so in that case, nobody would be paying for Metro South.
Seems like, yeah.
No. Okay. Well, that's
The delivery fee increase is crazy.
pardon.
The delivery fee increase, that's a massive jump.
That's a big jump.
Any other questions with Dropbox, or do you want to go to the next slide, Chris?
I think he's still working out the,
It would be an additional $2.50 per mile.
I'm
And
sorry.
that's assuming a 30-mile drop, 30-mile route from pickup to disposal.
Sorry, I didn't follow. What's 250?
if you kept it at 18 miles.
So the question then becomes, what would be the increase? If you were to take that, the 6 miles at 525,
Uh-huh.
times 6,
So it'd be $775?
so if it's 3150, you divide it by, let's say it's 32 minus 18. Yeah, an additional $2.25 per mile. So instead of 525 and to keep it at 18, it would increase to $7.50.
And that would apply to all the, no, I guess it wouldn't.
All the business, yeah. It's the same effect.
Yeah.
Well, after that would be.
All right, other comments, questions? Is there another slide?
There is.
Okay.
There it is.
Oh,
Interesting slide.
Just that one, okay.
So, Chris, I'd like to talk about Metro. Maybe we have to go back to some slides, but
Okay.
I went back and looked at the reports and actually the videos of the various meetings we've had over the past couple of years. That's right, that's how I spent my day. And let me start off by saying that we recognize the really big cost increases occurred at Metro during and after COVID. And that's when we were really concerned that, the cost increases were really great. And we were actually told by Metro in a meeting here in this building that those increases were for a couple of reasons. One, the cost of, supply chain things went up, as we've alluded to, and to try to keep the rate increases from being even greater, that Metro was not charging the cost of service that, and so they were, for instance, I'll use round numbers. Instead of a 9% increase, they might have been looking at like a 15% increase, and so that they were not covering the cost of their business. And I remember being told, that basically once that, glide path and recovery period of almost 4 years, I think it was behind us, then they expected, rate increases to go down again to sort of their normal, 4 to 6%. I mean, if you look at the years before that, they were pretty flat for a long time. And so last year, as I remember, you correct me if I'm wrong, is that I think the increase was 5.8% from Metro. And now, did I hear we gone up to 9 again? Mm-hmm. So I guess the question for Metro is, what happened to the recovery projection? Have I got that right, Chris?
And you're asking a loaded question.
Okay.
Because there's some people that are sitting behind you, they know my opinion as far as, over some of the things that Metro's done over the last few years.
If I got the facts right.
Yeah. I don't want to be harsh. I don't want to be, but I have to also be honest. There's a lot of things that are going on. Metro is looking at now running the transfer station with Metro personnel, and they're going to eliminate the contract for ecology, which has been running the transfer stations. There's a lot wrapped up in that tipping fee. A lot. It's not necessarily just the operation of the transfer stations. It's a lot of people. It's a lot of planners. It's if you see the org chart for the waste reps versus what it was 10 years ago, the amount of people is doubled. There's a couple things I think, as elected officials, you guys need to ask specifically. Number one, what's our recovery rate? Why hasn't it been reported since 2016? Because the Overhaul Metro's sole big objective was to increase that diversion rate to 2.5%, if I recall. Got nowhere near that. So the recovery rate has been down significantly. And they're having challenges, COVID is one of them. But in the private enterprise, when I worked at Waste Management, we had operations, and when the operations weren't making money, we got rid of them. Same with Waste Connection. When an operation's not making money, they make changes to the personnel of the operations. That hasn't happened. They hire a lot of people. But the costs still continue to escalate. the diversion is down, there's just a lot of questions. And I think that if they wanted to have an open process, they would have an open process. I know that the mayors from Sherwood and Beaverton have a lot of questions regarding the rates, and they've been very vocal, and they'd like to see, a more collaborative process. I work with a colleague who used to work at Metro, and his recollection is that they would put together the budget, and they would meet with every jurisdiction to explain what the costs were, what they were going to do, and get the input. That doesn't happen anymore. Everybody waits for Metro to come up with a number. And so I think that as far as being, and the other problem that I have, me personally, is that the solid waste management plan is not based on waste management processes and procedures. It's not founded in diversion or management. It's founded in equity and inclusion, which is completely different than waste management. And so I think if the objectives were to operate the transfer station at the highest efficiency with the highest diversion, you would put together a plan that says this is how we're going to do it, and you would execute that plan. And I don't think that's happening. And I think that if they were really cognizant of looking at the cost, a lot of these questions would be answered in that process. One of the things that I've been telling my clients is, if you're a cell hauler, the cost to utilize Metro if you're a cell hauler is around $50 to drive through the gate. The nice thing is in Milwaukie, those other cities, it's less than $50 a month to have garbage service picked up. So that high rate for cell haulers does have a benefit because it's giving people the choice whether they want to self haul or they want to utilize the services of the franchise haulers. That's a good thing in my opinion. But again, the bad thing is when you're paying a lot of money for garbage services, at some point, people determine whether they want to continue to have garbage service. In Milwaukie and in everywhere else, this service is not mandated. It's elected. So a lot of people choose not to have garbage collection services because either it's too high or they've got alternative needs. So to your question, there hasn't really been an open process that explains what's going on in Metro regarding the garbage, the garbage rates. When you do this to the city has an input. They have, in this case, the finance director looks at this information. I'm hired to do that. I work with the haulers. And so there's a level of accountability that comes through this process. If Metro had a similar process that the haulers do and the franchise jurisdictions do, you would have a lot more questions that would be answered throughout the process, and I think you get a better product.
So you mentioned a couple of cities that have been agitating about the rates. Are they represented? Metro has a board for this, right? Are they represented on the board?
They are not.
They are not? You know who's on the board?
No, they are. Are they? I think Mayor Rosner and Mayor Ady from the city of Beaverton.
Oh, Beaverton's on. Beaverton's on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Clackamas representatives are Martha Schrader and Denise McGriff, and of course, Christina is the vice chair of the advisory committee.
Well, this is Mayor McGriff's last year of being mayor, so there will be an opening there if anybody wants to step into that, and maybe we should be having a conversation with our reps.
I just want to, I'm sorry, I feel like I was inarticulate. I want to restate my observation. And my observation was that the Metro rates averaged 13% in the years 2020 to 2024. 13%.
Increases each year.
Each year, okay? It was a total of 65%. Then last year, that increase was 5.8. Good news, right? Now we're back at 9 and 11. We're double those from last year. And so this is, this is not what Metro told us over in the conference room over there in 2024, that they expected these to go back to historical increases. And so maybe it's only 1 year, but it's certainly in the wrong direction, and it's not insignificant. Yeah?
Do you know what justification they gave for the higher increase?
Like we said, we don't know.
Or did,
That's what Chris said.
yeah.
Smells like an ODOT situation. I mean, No process, no.
Public meetings?
They are public meetings, but I will tell you,
Have you gone and watched the public meeting or?
I have watched some of them.
Okay.
And I've looked at every one of the agendas. And the agendas is all about the system plan and what they're doing to deal with waste. There's not a lot of attention from my perspective, and I will admit, my audit is not 100% complete. You know, but I look at these things. And I just didn't see a lot of attention paid to the cost.
Rates.
So,
I'd love to join that board.
well, okay, so the board is, people sign up for 2-year terms, and they can be extended for 1 or 2 years. How that process takes place, I can't figure it out. You know, I think people just say, I'll serve another year, and they kind of, barely, stay on the board. To the mayor's point, we know that Denise's position is going to become open. They meet every month.
It's just going in the wrong
It'd be
direction.
great to have a Milwaukee representative on that board.
Yeah. Yeah.
Will Mayor McGriff serve out the rest of this calendar year?
I mean, I haven't talked to her about it. I mean,
She probably will.
She probably.
So when we do our,
They will do a
Committee
recruitment
okay.
in the fall.
Okay,
Oh, they
And
will.
announce it.
okay,
And how many are going to be open, how many people they're looking for.
Yeah.
okay.
And, they have it broken up by, by communities of interest and then, geographic city and county and that kind of thing.
But in the meanwhile, I mean, there's nothing that keeps us from trying to have a conversation with both Mayor McGriff and our treasurer about these concerns. I'm just, they're all, I mean,
Per your affordability goal, that would be good. Maybe action steps for council.
Well, I've gathered some of this information, over a few months, but I wanted to hear this latest on the increases for Metro, so I wish it was closer to 5.8, but it's in the wrong direction.
I appreciate you bringing that up, actually, very much.
Do you want to keep thinking about it, or would maybe a couple representatives of you want to reach out to our Clackamas County representatives on that board? And I'm thinking with, Councilor Kosarabadi as the affordability
I'd
lead.
love
and
to.
I'll do it.
Councilor Massey as the hawk watching this, the trash hawk.
that'd be awesome.
Okay.
We'll go in costume, we'll put bins over us,
And we'll put Millie can be the trash hawk.
Oscar the ground.
Okay.
Okay, you and I'll sort it out. But I think that we have 3 targets.
Great.
Yeah.
More the better, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's awesome. On a different topic, the staff report told us about the survey of residents and the love for the Milwaukie Waste Day, which I think we all knew was true. But the part that was a surprise to me was the high percentage who knew about food recycling.
Yeah.
Really high, higher than I expected. So, I mean, staff recommended keeping both of those programs. I tend to agree with that, but I wanted to make sure everyone else was in agreement with that recommendation.
That's right. I was shocked by how high it was too, but it's a program people use. That's great. That's our help.
So before we wrap this, just to clarify, we're not making a decision today on rates. It would be adopted on the June 2nd fee schedule, but are you comfortable with us moving forward with the proposal shown by Chris today and putting that into the fee schedule?
Yeah.
Sounded like Chris was trying to talk. Anything you wanted to add, Chris?
No, I just, I like these sessions because, again, we want to solicit your input, get what you think is, the elected body, what you support, what you don't support, if you have changes, or you come back and say, I want to change this, or I don't want to do this, let us know. We can amend that report, or I'll amend that report per your input. And if you have any other things that you want me to address, I will do that for you.
Any changes or additional topics you'd like Chris to address?
No, I would just like to say thank you, Chris, for all the work you do. And I appreciate your responses to some of the tougher questions. And to the haulers, I appreciate you all, your transparency. You guys have done nothing but try to do everything you can to work with us. You've been more willing partners than other entities, so I just want to say I appreciate you, and, you know, we see the pressure that Metro puts on you all.
Okay, we'll move over putting it in the fee schedule. I did also want to ask while we're here and while our friends are in the audience, you know, you took action on the franchise agreement at the end of last year, and we did talk about bringing that back for further conversation about next steps. Is there direction council wants to provide on ideal timing for when that would come back? We wanted to get through budget. We need to breathe.
Well, I hadn't really thought about the timing. I mean, I know that I did hear from the haulers and they are interested in doing it sooner rather than later. They also did offer us a tour of a Waste Connections / K-Hoods recycling facility out in the Clackamas industrial area. So I wanted to see if people were interested in having that tour. Is that something we want to book as a group, or and maybe we try and do that, you know, in June or July,
okay.
and then move into the
kind of
franchise discussion after that.
September-ish, August, September-ish.
For a franchise agreement?
To discuss that.
Yeah, August.
Okay. Great.
I had a follow-up question from last year, and it was revolved around, you know, customer service. And, you know, it was like, we had this interesting discussion about, gee, was Michael the customer service operator? Remember that discussion? Coordinator, you remember that? Yeah. You know, were the calls coming to you and that kind of thing? I think we kind of got away from that, but you know, again, I go back to, you know, I hate to put a lot of searching on the residents if they have something wrong. And, you know, ideally it'd be one button, you know, it'd be the easy button, you know, I got a problem. But I don't know, has there been any resolution to that?
So a couple things. One is anything that gets to my desk, I have a direct line to Dave and Chris, who are excellent at getting something done. The other change that has come is, if you know Amy Francis, who's our utility biller, her husband just happens to work in management, at waste management. And if I have anything that somebody is, if it gets to me, I let him know and he immediately handles it. I think there's a problem in that when residents go to waste management itself, they're going to the corporate area in Phoenix, and getting that to the dispatch and the management here can be a challenge. But once we get it to management here, they're awesome at addressing it, coming back, picking it up. There was a lady 2 weeks ago that had broken her foot, and she had contacted and wanted to see if they could pick up her trash from her backyard instead of the front yard. I let them know, Waste Management came out and did it. So kind of to answer your question, there's a bust in the, from my point of view, in the corporate structure of how they take customer complaints and fix them. But from this team that's sitting over there, I think that they're excellent of once it gets to my desk, they take care of it.
But the problem is how many don't get to your desk.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
because we don't have a trash, if somebody goes on the city website, they don't see trash department or garbage hauler, you know. I mean, I don't know how the ones that get to your desk actually end up at your desk. But I do recall when we were looking at what some of the other cities were doing, that there were some dedicated surveys and some dedicated, like, sort of focus group times at a 3-year or 5-year interval or something. And I do feel like when we talk about new franchise forms, we want to think about inserting some of that.
I think staff would appreciate that too. There is in the the code and the franchise agreement that was, he voted to end, there was something about a mid-year check-in, but frankly, it was quite vague about what that included. And I think that I would love clearer direction from you on what you expect from the customer service side. And I agree with you, Mary, that we don't know what we don't know. I will say from my stance, I don't hear about waste concerns.
Okay.
That's not the top thing that.
That is wonderful, Michael. That's wonderful, haulers. That is not a one-button solution.
No.
Okay? Now I'm going to add in my personal experience.
Okay.
My recycle bin, I've had it for 10 years, they're out in the sun, they crack and everything like that. I just didn't pay any attention to cracks until it got dumped and then the whole top was off and I said, okay, I'll have to get a new one. And so I'm kind of a Boy Scout and I like to follow the rules. And so I went, to the website and was directed to the Waste Management and said, if you got a problem, fill out this form, send it in, tell us what the problem is, blah, blah, blah. I did that, I said, we'll get back to you when you're gonna, I need a replacement. He said, we'll get back to you in 2 or 3 days on when you'll get it. Didn't hear anything back, and so I said, okay, I'll call the 800 number, and I guess I talked to someone in Phoenix. And I said, when's my new one coming? And they go, so you put it in the system? I don't have a record of it. Okay. And they said, but I'll take care of it, and I'll get you in the system, and she got it in the system, and then they deliver it during my next, Tuesday thing. And so, if anything like that happens to me, I am never gonna call you. Because I know if I call you, you'll recognize my name, and it'll get taken care of that afternoon. But that's not how you're going to deal with most residents, okay? And so, if we want the online thing to be the one button, I'm okay with that. I know how to do it, but you gotta make it work. And if you want it to be the 800 number in Phoenix, I'm okay with that too, as long as it works. But I think that, all of this, I quite frankly don't want Michael in this business,
I don't want to be in it.
Okay? So, I don't want to tell you how to do it, I'm just saying it's not where we want it to be.
Sure.
I think I've had this conversation a little bit with Dave, and I think they agree with you. It's up to corporate to hear this and figure out a better way.
Okay. It's a data point, that's all it is.
You want to both go talk to them too?
What's that?
You want to both go talk to corporate too?
Nope, don't want to do that.
So in terms of the
Kind of gonna turn with Phoenix.
we'll put Emma and Scott, they're kind of our gatekeepers on our schedule, so we'll have them contact you and try and figure out a date for a.
I was also thinking, we have our facility at KV Recycling and we have Pioneer Recycling, which processes all the commingle recycling from the curb here. And they're 2 or 3 miles apart, so maybe we can do both of them in the same day.
That'd be great. That'd be great. Okay. All right, if no further questions or comments, I think we're good to go forward with the fee schedule next month. And we're keeping bulky waste, Milwaukie.
That's one of our big events of the year.
There's now a community garage sale.
Before the
bulky waste.
Yeah, and then more neighborhoods are doing it every year.
Yeah.
And I will say,
It would be so interesting to find out, of all that stuff that's put on the curb, how much of it is recycled to other users. I bet it's really a high percentage.
Yeah.
Because I put things out and they're gone before the haulers get there.
well, and we know from just Facebook comments and other things that all the people who live around Milwaukie are very jealous of the bulky waste day. And I suspect we have some people bringing their stuff in through the city limits, but anyway. All right. Well,
If you don't mind, Mayor, can I just mention too, we worked with city staff. We requested, the boundary line was a little off kilter. I mean, there was 1 week that was really heavy and 1 week that was really light. And it caused our trucks to be out there on that one Saturday till late in the evening. And so they did approve that adjustment. So now I think it's Monroe Street is kind of the boundary line between the 2 weekends, which will really help out in terms of the 2 Saturdays. So.
great. Good. All right. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
We will move on to our next item, which is the manufacturing and business industrial zones code overhaul.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have Bill first and Matthew Ellis. I think it's both of your first times presenting to us.
First times.
Welcome. Yeah.
First time.
Proud here, right?
Yeah,
Be nice, council.
we can take it. Vera's been,
Okay, you.
so yeah, good evening, Mayor, Council. Matthew Ellis, here with my associates.
Well, first.
Here to talk about some changes that we're proposing for the manufacturing and business industrial zone. And kind of walk you through the process that we've done to get to this point, and then kind of where we're going next. So first, kind of helping to kind of locate us, we have a total of 4 of what we would consider manufacturing zones in Milwaukie. We'll start with up here in the corner. Oh, that's not showing up on there. That's okay. In the northeast corner, we have the manufacturing zone, which runs along Johnson Creek Boulevard, kind of on both sides. Primarily, or the large user there is PCC, or Precision Casserole Corporation. Outside of PCC and kind of their group there, there's a few small manufacturing businesses and contractor laydown yards, as well as the city's public works Johnson Creek Boulevard facility on the far east side. In the southeastern corner, we have the BI zone, or the business industrial zone, primarily business park development, several key businesses to the city of Milwaukie, including Morgan Tool, Lakeside Brewery, Dave's Killer Bread, Parker Megget, formerly the Bob's Red Mill site. That's all kind of incorporated into the BI zone along International Way. And then outside of those big campuses, we have a lot of multi-tenant buildings, so offices, the Northwest Pair lobby group also has a building there, so kind of a smattering of other like office type users. And then in the northwestern corner, we have the North Milwaukie Innovation Area, which is comprised of the North Milwaukie Employment Zone and then the MUTZA, which stands for the Mixed Use Tacoma Station Area Zone. Those were rezoned from manufacturing, so both the NMIA and the M zone used to all be zoned manufacturing until 2018 when council adopted the NMIA plan and the associated code changes. So the NMIA zone was updated in 2018, but the M zone standards were left from when they were written the early 2000s.
I'm sorry, Matthew, did you say NMIA is within MUTSA?
It's kind of a super area. So the NMIA is both the NME and the MUTZA.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Okay.
Yeah, so it's broken, the NMIA is broken up into 2.
Tacoma Station Area Plan is almost like an overlay. It's more permissive for certain things.
Yeah. And then, both the M zone and the BI zone, during our analysis, we found that it is almost completely built out, and that's also what we heard when we met with folks. There is only, I think, 1 vacant parcel in the BI zone, and that is a wetland. And then there is some redevelopment opportunities in the M zone. There's some existing residential kind of interspersed into the zone from before it was zoned manufacturing.
You're talking there about the North Milwaukie?
No,
You're
no, I'm
talking
sorry.
about the BI? You're talking about
The M zone in the northeastern corner.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah, so-
there's still some residential.
Yeah, it's part of the Llewellyn neighborhood there. Yeah, so a little bit of background from the code, so and kind of what the project is. So the current and proposed purposes of both of these zones is to provide clean, employee-intensive uses, really wanting, there are jobs creators, as we're calling them internally. And our project is really, I know that on the briefing material, it was called an overhaul project, but that was, maybe more at the beginning, we thought that there was gonna be some more changes needed, but as we got into the analysis, we realized that the scope is much narrower and it's really more focused on modernization, and we'll talk about kind of why that is based on the feedback that we received. And then the updates that we're proposing are primarily in 4 categories. So to remove outdated uses such as photo processing, newsstands, and beauty parlors, to get rid of some unnecessary or overly restrictive discretionary standards, such as a requirement in the BI zone for uses in the BI zone to serve primarily the users of the BI zone. So trying to keep everything contained. Outdated formatting, so a lot of our zones have moved their uses into a use table, which is much easier for both staff and users in the zone to kind of see what is allowed and what isn't allowed, as well as to provide or to move from discretionary standards to some more clear and objective standards, kind of in the same vein and heart that, with which we do that with housing. Or with housing, it's really a requirement, but wanting to provide our users as they're coming to us with clear and objective standards that they can meet for this industrial development.
I'm curious as to why you were motivated to do that last one, because housing is dictated by the state. Do you find you spending a lot of time? Are you getting a lot of applications where there's issues about the standards?
No, I think that more it's, and one of the things we'll talk about is that we're not expecting to see a lot of redevelopment opportunities, but when there are opportunities for redevelopment, we want as easy of a process for people when they come in. It's more of a customer service thing. We want people to be able to read our standards, know exactly what they need to provide, and get better first submissions, because every submission can take 2 to 4 weeks to turn around comments, and then 2 to 4 weeks to address the comments. And so it's more of a customer service trying to approach that.
And actually, just to jump in as well, when we talk a little bit more about the discretionary standards, we'll get into it a bit more, but where we're kind of thinking in the direction that we're planning to move in is to maintain the existing discretionary standards, but to sort of add supplementary clear and objective standards. We do this in the non-residential building design standards as well. There's basically 2 tracks. And so I know you all get land use certification, so you've probably seen there's been a couple development review applications in the BI zone recently. Those are type 2 applications. And so the idea would be that by having clear and objective standards, it would essentially allow folks an opportunity to design their project to sort of another set of standards that would allow them to go through a sort of quicker type 1 process. Currently, we're not proposing to sort of eliminate those discretionary standards. It would be sort of just another option for folks.
Before we go on, I have sort of an off-the-wall question, but it's related. There are about 3 or 4 houses on that little parallel street to, I think it's Ochico. They look like houses, but I think they might be businesses. I think one is like a stone cutter, marble, and one might be a hair salon, I think. Are all of those houses been converted to businesses?
Yes.
All of them?
Those ones are not residential.
I mean, I stumbled across the place one time, and I was like, wait, people live here? And then I looked at them, and it looked like it was businesses, but I only really saw signage on a couple of them, so I wasn't sure about the other one or other two?
The ones on Ochoco, I believe, have all been converted into, those have
Okay,
all been
okay,
commercial. The ones on Johnson Creek, those ones, there are still a handful, probably half a dozen that are still
Okay.
actually
Yeah,
residential.
so the ones you see from McLaughlin, yeah, are probably all businesses, but there are definitely some still residential back there along Johnson Creek.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I don't know.
And just to kind of run you through the process, we did detail some of this in the staff report, but we started with a peer cities review, looking at other cities in the metro, seeing how they're approaching their manufacturing zone. We also conducted, it's not on the slide, but we also conducted a vacancy analysis. So the city has access to economic development data. We were able to find out that in the last year, we've had a 1.7% vacancy rate this was in the BI zone. This is in both the M and BI zone. Over the last 10 years, the average vacancy rate has been 2.4%. So a very stable district with long-term users. We're not seeing a lot of turnover and empty spaces. When we did the BLI analysis, we did that again over just the M zone and BI zone, using what Metro used when they did their BLI analyses in 2016. Every parcel, other than the one vacant parcel, which is a wetland, was far too expensive for purchase and redevelopment based on the strike prices adjusted for inflation that were used in 2016. So basically the layperson's way of saying that is that we don't expect turnover of these structures anytime soon. It's still a very profitable, the buildings that are currently there. That was kind of the internal research, and then our external public engagement. We met with several of our government partners, significant businesses, again, in the BI zone, and reached out to those in the M zone, as well as reaching out to about a dozen to 18 commercial real estate brokers who are on the ground and had listings on the ground in those zones. So from the feedback that we received, we first heard a desire to maintain flexibility to new businesses, to avoid unnecessary hurdles and barriers to entry, and the biggest hurdle is often use categories. So for a user to come in, their use has to be listed in the use table. We want to make sure that we're capturing the uses that we want to keep and keeping out the uses that we don't want to have in those use tables. And so in both zones, we've maintained broad manufacturing and production allowances. We also again, with that relatively stable, with those relatively stable zones, we don't want to be making changes that would displace or encourage, displacement of these users. And so there's a real desire to maintain stability for the existing businesses. We have made sure that the businesses that have chosen to site in these zones are reflected in the proposed uses. And then as well to protect industrial lands. In Milwaukie, we have a very small amount of industrial land, about 10% by land area. And so we don't want low employment generators kind of infiltrating and taking over that land. We want, the jobs to be present as much as we can. And then from our more private side folks, we heard a very similar thing of maintaining flexibility. As commercial real estate agents are helping users site, they'll often look at our zoning codes. Several of these commercial real estate brokers know enough about zoning code, just enough to be dangerous. They still call us to let us know. Yes, they still want to make sure and get a thumbs up from us. But they can read and interpret and usually help their users. Otherwise, we get a lot more calls. And so they encouraged flexibility where possible. Again, we heard the limited available industrial land, so this was, a recognition of the small space that both of our zones kind of take up in the city, as well as a desire to retain limited allowances for commercial uses. So for really kind of two main reasons. One was it provides nearby amenities for industrial employees in the zone. If you're eating lunch, or if you're taking lunch at Dave's Killer Bread, you can walk down the street there's like several restaurants kind of in that area, instead of needing to get in your car and drive somewhere, helping reduce those vehicle trips, as well as drawing customers in. So one of the big things that we heard from Dave's Killer Bread was that since Bob's Red Mill has closed, they've seen a decrease in their visitorship. There was a lot of cross-pollination, users residents' money being brought into Bob's Red Mill or Dave's Killer Bread, and then kind of a cross-pollination between them. So a desire to maintain some of those retail uses that will bring people to the zone to increase money spent. And now I'm going to pass it over to Will to kind of talk about some of the changes that we're making.
Can I ask a question before we go on, because it was in your presentation, but I was interested in, maintaining, high wages.
Yeah.
Positions.
Yeah.
And I guess my question is, how do you define what are high wages, living wages, whatever you're calling it? How do you define it? And really, how do you influence who comes in and who doesn't?
Yeah, it's a really great question. So we are only one part of that equation. To answer your second question first, we're only one part of that equation. We also have an economic development program manager who works more on the programmatic side, and she was an integral part. I'm sure you've seen things from Sierra from time to time. She'll work more on the, helping users cite or helping users navigate inside the city. We're not targeting specifically like high wage employment or anything like that. We would obviously love as high wage employment as possible for the people who are working in Milwaukie, but it's not really something from a regulatory perspective that we can require or encourage. Really, it's recognizing where those high wage jobs are. So one of them is in like sustainable manufacturing, for example. Those are high margin products which can turn into high wage jobs. And so making sure that we have allowances for sustainable manufacturing, for example, which is included. And so it's more about making sure that our use table kind of encapsulates the users that we would want that would provide those high wage jobs, versus we don't need more McDonald's at the $12 an hour or whatever, that those lower wage things. We'll save those for the more low density commercial zones that we have.
Well, do we have any reliable data on, it was first when you said a few minutes ago that Metro, I guess, has data on the value of the property that tells us we shouldn't expect to see a lot of redevelopment.
Yeah.
Do we have data on either wage rates or job density per acre for our zones? That was when we did the NMIA plan, that was a big part of the discussion. And there was concern that we have too much warehousing. The warehousing is not typically a high wage job.
Right.
And that how do we get it more to be production type work so that it is a higher wage job. And of course, now in today's era, the thing, and I did see it called out in your staff report, is the data centers, right? Like those are definitely not high wage jobs.
Right.
And not very high density, job density per acre.
Exactly, yeah. I don't know if we, honestly, this is where I wish Sierra was here to be able to tell you what data we do have access to. You were asking about job density. I think that we can follow up with council give you that information. Yes, we can, or yes, we do?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So it was job density per acre, and then what was the other one, Mary?
Wages, yeah,
Wages, okay.
wage ranges, you know.
Yeah. Well, I'll talk to Sierra, or we'll talk to Sierra tomorrow, and we can get some, like, in a follow-up.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Perfect. So, as I'm sure you all saw in the staff report, the change, because one of the large changes that we're proposing is sort of the formatting elements, taking all of these uses and putting them into a table format. Just visually, it's a little bit difficult to follow. And so we have kind of pulled out the substantive changes here. So sort of what you won't see here, but what is the majority of the changes, like I said, the formatting and the things that Matthew mentioned earlier, sort of updating the uses to reflect sort of current uses or where they're used in other zones like the NMIA, sort of using a consistent definition. So that way, if you're a business trying to locate in the city, and you obviously know what your business does, and you're looking at the NMIA and then the M zone and the BI zone, you can slot yourself into one use category in all three versus, slightly different manufacturing production kind of uses. So those pieces have been left out of this, but for the M zone, the substantive changes that we are looking at are adding creative space as a permitted use. The idea being that when we say creative space, what we're talking about is kind of like industrial adjacent artist uses. So things like a sculptor who does welding or some sort of, maybe pottery with kilns and things like that, or glass blowing, something like that. And adding this to the M zone would, one, sort of be consistent with how we are allowing or allowed uses in the NMIA. And additionally, just the sort of development types that we're seeing in the M zone, the scale of development, they're a lot smaller spaces, so allowing these uses kind of slots into those, the sort of existing development that's there. Additionally, wholesale trade. We are proposing to allow that in the M zone, and doing that similar to creative space is consistent with some of our other industrial zones in the NMIA, and also sort of goes back to the feedback that we heard about providing flexibility for folks that are, manufacturers and producers and sort of these industrial adjacent uses. So it's kind of that consistency again and flexibility that we heard from the folks we reached out to. And then, like I mentioned, in terms of updating definitions for consistency, the existing industrial definition in the manufacturing zone was, included some language related to transshipment of goods and was just overall fairly unwieldy. And so we are proposing to use a general manufacturing and production definition that we are also using in the BI zone. It is also used in the NMIA. And then finally, this limited use allowance point is related to the last feedback bullet that was on the previous slide. Basically, there was a little bit of tension in the feedback we received, right, where we were clearly hearing that we have limited industrial land and that it has low vacancy rate. And so there's a strong desire to protect that from both government agency partners and from, business owners. Additionally, we also heard from business owners that, hey, we want amenities for our employees. We have people who work here, they're looking, to eat food on their lunch break. And so as we were kind of talking, with our team, with staff, our team, trying to understand the ways that we can sort of help to provide those amenities, while also, preventing them from proliferating in the zone and pricing out other users. We are proposing to allow them as a limited use, and so that puts a size maximum on the uses, limits them to 4,000 square feet, which in the M zone would be sort of consistent as well with some of the sort of smaller scale development. Additionally, as you probably know, there's the Portland Takira is there. Looking through the land use history, it looks like it was operating sort of as a bar restaurant from before it was annexed to the city in the early 90s. Similar situation for retail-oriented sales with Wichita Feed and Hardware. And so, essentially the change on this front is to allow these uses as a limited use with that maximum size restriction.
And that's for both M and BI?
It is both for M and BI. It's a little bit different for the BI. So in the BI, they're currently limited uses actually, so there's no change proposed there. And I just switched to the BI zone slide. But the proposed change for the BI is this sort of third bullet point here, which is removing the requirement that limited uses, quote, serve primarily the employees of the district. And so there's no change in what's allowed in terms of them as eating establishment or them as limited uses, but the change is sort of more consistent with what we're talking about in the M zone. The restriction is the maximum size, it's 4,000 square feet.
But they would be allowed anywhere in the zone. Like now we have the little shopping center on Freeman there, which is the node where all the eating and, yeah. But this would allow them to be sprinkled north.
Yes.
I think it'd be, I don't know to what extent you've talked to those businesses there, but I would like to hear their feedback. Because my sense is that some of them struggle because they only get a lunch business. It's a hard, it's hard to make. And I noticed that like Parker Megget brings in food trucks a couple days a week, which I think is great, to see that. But I guess I just want to make sure, that we're also hearing from those existing business owners and those kind of businesses.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah.
If I could just jump in really quick, there isn't a geographic limitation for those limited uses now.
Oh, there isn't?
No, they can in fact be located anywhere.
Okay.
This language, this serving primarily employees of the district is super discretionary. I don't even know how we would evaluate that. I don't know if we ever have in the past. So it's kind of just trying to pull some of this kind of discretionary language out, just because it's really kind of impossible to deal with anyway. But no, I think those nodes have been created there, but they don't have to be there. Somebody could open up a small sandwich shop or something, kind of anywhere.
Anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that clarifying. So then going back to sort of the top of the slide, in the BI zone, as we're kind of going through the uses and adding them into the sort of new format, we also noticed recycling centers essentially as a big standout in the BI zone in terms of sort of what the existing development pattern is, what the uses are that we're seeing there. The business industrial zone is much more sort of a business park kind of a feel, and recycling centers were sort of out of step with that use type. And so those have been proposed. Currently they're allowed as an accessory use, but we're proposing to remove those, that allowance. And then the change that we did propose to the limited use allowance is for indoor-outdoor recreation. Essentially, they're currently allowed as a conditional use, and we have seen a number of conditional use applications come through in the last 5 to 7 years, which have been for small-scale indoor recreation, essentially, like a Pilates studio. I think most recently there was was a Krav Maga studio. And so with the same sort of size limitation that we're seeing for limited use allowances, again, that's the 4,000 square foot max size. Essentially, we're able to allow these small scale uses to enter these zones without having to go through the conditional use process, which is a type 3 review that goes to the planning commission and represents a fairly large burden for those folks looking to locate in the zone. Yes, and then the last piece here, which is something that was not included in the attachment, is related to the building and site design standards. In the business industrial zone, there's a handful of standards that are related to the building and site design, and they're very sort of discretionary. There are things like developing the lots so that you can easily surveil the property, and things like constructing the building out of durable materials, essentially standards that are difficult to demonstrate as the applicant, sort of difficult from an administration perspective as well. And so this is that piece that we talked about briefly at the beginning about adding sort of objective standards as well. So the idea here again is that the discretionary standards would be maintained if folks wanted to review a project to those discretionary standards, but if you were able to meet the objective standards and wanted to sort of have the sort of easier process, that sort of type 1 process, that you can do that. And sort of the driving force behind this is that, as we've said, this zone is very built out, and what we're seeing are additions and alterations rather than new development. And so, as you all know, International Ways is fairly, organically shaped. And so we've kind of put together one example of what the standard would look like. And so currently there is a standard that sort of is related to the orientation of service activity and aimed at preventing the user experience of somebody in the BI zone from being one where you're seeing loading bays and trash dumpsters sort of along the road. And so we have a standard that says that you are required to orient major service activity away from major streets. But that presents a problem as folks are coming in with an existing, site that has a building sited on it that maybe fronts along International Way on one of its many curves, and they're trying to understand what facade can I put this loading bay on. We have an active development review application right now that is in this exact situation. Their building is sort of sited off kilter to the road, right where International Way curves, and there were a lot of conversations with the applicant trying to understand sort of how that would work. And all of this to say, we're proposing an objective standard that would set out clear standards for what we mean when we mean that service activity needs to be oriented away from major streets. So that would give applicants some clarity while still maintaining that flexibility if they believed that they met sort of the discretionary standard and wanted to still pursue that route as opposed to the objective standard. I'm happy to linger on this slide for a little bit longer if that's helpful. I know there's a lot of words on here.
So this would only apply to new projects, I'm assuming?
It would, yes, correct. It would also apply to additions if you were, planning to do an addition as well, not necessarily just new construction. But if you were doing like an internal tenant improvement or something to that effect, then generally we're reviewing the site characteristics and sort of exterior facade elements.
Well, even modifications could be problematic, I think.
Correct. Yeah.
The addition of new loading bays or
Yeah,
something, kind of where we have folks retrofitting existing buildings, and our standards don't help us necessarily in evaluating those projects. So we're trying to make those a bit clearer.
You're gonna have to have some flexibility, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and then moving on, so we're of course talking to you all tonight, but the next steps, a week from today, we have a meeting scheduled with the Planning Commission. And then after we gather your feedback, the Planning Commission's feedback, we will create the code language as well as those building and site design standards and bring that back to you. We're thinking in late summer, July and August, for hearings again with both you and the Planning Commission. And then finally, we have a few key questions here that we wanted to use to maybe guide the conversation. And of course, if you have any additional feedback as well, we would be very interested in that as well. But,
Okay, you want us to take these questions one at a time. Eating and retail establishments is limited uses, and currently we're saying 4,000 square foot is the size limit.
yeah, correct.
And the M zone is only Johnson Creek. It's not the BI zone.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, and again, sorry to interrupt you, but the BI zone currently allows these as a limited use. The only proposed change, and I should be clear, currently allows eating establishments as a limited use. The only proposed change in the BI zone is removing that language that requires that they serve primarily the employees of the district.
Feelings on that first question?
I think that's fine.
Yeah, if the goal is uniformity, I would think that you would want to do that.
I mean, I do see a difference between Johnson Creek and International Way, because Johnson Creek is a main thoroughfare, right? People are on it who are not doing business at those businesses. People are not typically on International Way who are not headed to a business along International Way. So I guess that's where I feel like, are we opening, I mean, 4,000 square feet is pretty small, but are we opening up like a competing commercial zone to our existing commercial zones with this, I guess is my only concern. And, you know, yeah.
I guess at that point, like, take our BI zone. We allow for retail-oriented, like, restaurant uses, but they're only clustered in one area because that's what the market does. It agglomerates services in one area. So legalizing those commercial uses in the M zone doesn't necessarily mean that we'll see the market justify expanding there.
Yeah. One sort of other note on that point is that I think when it comes to these zones, again, since they are very built out, as you think about the buildings that are there, a lot of the spaces are not sort of fit for, like sort of not currently built to house a restaurant. And so I think as, you know, a potential restaurant is looking to locate, what the costs are in terms of the tenant improvements that would be required, I would imagine are you know, play a fairly large role as well in that, and that could be the case as well in the manufacturing zone.
What would be a retail-oriented operation that's primarily served the workers in the area? Is it like a bodega?
Yeah, that was why I stopped and rephrased in the BI zone. It's eating establishments that are limited use. The retail sales is a separate piece. Okay. So.
Yeah, and even to the question for like the addition of, and I guess we can frame up this question a little bit better. Currently, for both Wichita Feed and Hardware and Portland Taquiera in the M zone that are existing uses from before it was annexed into the city, those are considered legally non-conforming uses. And so part of this, and part of the addition of these uses is to help these users come out of legal non-conformity and, you know, come into basically conformity with the standards of the zone. And so, yeah, as far as, you know, retail sales and service in like as an amenity or like serving the folks there, I don't know that we would see a retail operation in the M zone that like served as an amenity, but you know, another example kind of down the street from Wichita Feed and Hardware is there is a small engine repair spot that also has some sales associated of, you know, projects that they've worked on and rehabilitated or something like that. So the primary use of that site is the small engine repair and service shop. But if they had like a retail component, it would allow them to incorporate that retail component into the use rather than, you know, needing to like hide that or like do that under the table.
Is that the location that has the embroidery shop on the second floor?
I think it's like, yeah, it's like next to it or on the second floor. I think it is. I think it's like right next door, yeah.
No, I think it's on the second floor.
Is it on the second floor?
Yeah, it's right above the...
I haven't been. We drive past it when we go to the JCB, but yeah.
I mean, I feel like we have, yeah, I mean, retail, isn't there somebody selling pool tables or some kind of billiard table?
Yeah, I think it's primarily a production or a repair location. I don't know if they have a showroom off the top of my head, but.
Can I ask more high-level question?
Oh, sure.
I mean,
Why,
my
like,
point is,
we have three
have
different
retail.
zones that you've outlined, the BI, the M, and MIA,
Mm-hmm.
and then let's set the, I forget, the Muta or.
Yeah, but the Matza?
Matza.
Yeah.
Let's set Matza aside, because that's clearly a different.
Okay.
What's really the, like, policy differences between three zones? And why, what's the justification for not just having one industrial zone or one more, to what Councilor Coservati said, just standardization across the zone, or does that make it more?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, the NMIA, and the NMIA makes up both the NME, the North Milwaukie Employment Zone, and the MUNSA. But the North Milwaukie Employment Zone, when those standards were written, and Vera can also chime in because I think Vera was here and maybe knows more about the NMIA plan, but the goal of that zone is really, you know, taking advantage of being along McCullough and McLaughlin and 99, and there's a lot more like truck traffic and user traffic. We also, that's where the Milwaukie store, is that the right name? Yeah. It is also there, so it's more about taking advantage of the highway that kind of runs through it. The BI zone, again, not as much, or distinct from the NME and the M zone. The BI zone is more about business park, and while it still has production uses, you see a lot more of the like wide campus, kind of like big presence users, and so it's serving a very different clientele than both the and people who are coming to the BI zone. You kind of, as Mayor Beatty intimated, you don't really like accidentally find yourself in the BI zone. You're usually on 224 if you're kind of in that realm, versus JCB and McLaughlin are both, you know, people are driving through the district. And then the M zone is kind of even distinct from those two. And the M zone is really more like the NME. In fact, the M zone, or the NME used to be zoned manufacturing for that reason, but was changed as part of the NMIA plan to really kind of focus on those things. So they all serve three different purposes. From a policy perspective, they serve different clienteles, but they have very similar goals, which is to provide opportunities for employers to site and set up here in Milwaukie.
Yeah, and sort of along those lines, just a little bit more, I guess, as you go along JCB and you see sort of the use types there, you're seeing like contractor laid out in yards with outdoor storage. It's a little bit more of a, maybe you could say scrappy kind of use characteristic than you'd see in the BI zone, which is, again, distinct sort of from the NMIA for all the reasons Matthew mentioned, and additionally for the transit line that's right there and the proximity to downtown. And so for those reasons, there's different, you know, design standards, site design standards and things like that there.
Yeah, okay, that's helpful.
It's a good question.
Councilor Coservati and I have talked about this a little bit, but if the BI zone is more of an office park, I've heard, I'll admit, I understand commercial zoning far less than I do residential zoning, but Councilor Lewis once said that like you don't want to co-locate housing and retail services with industrial uses because it's the trip generated is really hard. Office park uses seem slightly different. Am I wrong there, or like what is the difference? Why would you not want to co-locate residential uses with an office use?
I think in this specific situation, like related to the BI zone, what we're seeing is that all of the land is developed essentially, and that there's a very sort of competitive vacancy rate in the sort of 1% to 2% over a 10-year period, and allowing a housing use, which I think is kind of maybe where you're going. those uses command higher rents. And that sort of functionally makes the land potentially more valuable. And so the idea is that we have a very sort of healthy industrial environment right now. It's providing a lot of employment. And the purpose of the zones, like we said, are sort of, we're currently not proposing to change them. And it's sort of geared at that employment intensive use type. And so if you were to allow housing in those zones, I think the concern would be that that would sort of outcompete and potentially harm those industrial uses. I think in the Mutza, for example, which has sort of those different characteristics with the proximity to transit, there are some housing sort of allowances worked in there. But yeah, I'm not sure if that's helpful.
That helps. I mean, I think about it. We talk about farmland as an example of this. Farmland is a relatively low land value, but you still want to have farmland to be able to preserve that industry. So you don't allow for, I mean, you need UGBs for a reason, so you can't allow that competing interest. That's helpful for me, yeah.
Well, and I would say, like, you know, Robert, or Councilor Massey and I went and met with, you know, a few of the businesses in the BI zone last year, and met with, well, like 2.5 years ago now, maybe, with Parker Meggett. And they run shifts, you know, I mean, I think even though a lot of the activity is sort of office day use, it's not all. I think some places are running, you know, very early shifts or very late shifts. And so, you know, how compatible is that with residential, a residential use as well, I think is another factor. We heard a lot about that when we did the NMIA plan, because we had someone who wanted to build residential in the middle of the NMIA, and we heard a lot about we had a lot of advice about how bad an idea that was and for the future of the business, of it as a business district, yeah.
I think one final consideration is, and this also came up in our feedback, we didn't include it because it wasn't really germane, but it's germane to this. The users of that zone, or even just driving down International Way, that facility of International Way was not really set up for a lot of like multimodal users. So, you know, if you're going to site your industrial with residential, or allow some of those more commercial and residential uses to commingle, you're going to want really solid bicycle and pedestrian facilities. But it's, you know, a very narrow 2-lane road with a lot of truck traffic kind of running down there, and that it would take a lot of like additional investment to get International Way like kind of caught up to where it would be able to service the additional demand that putting like residential in the zone. So there's like a few different reasons, all of which I think have like some amount of merit.
Sure. Yeah.
I have a couple questions, Mayor.
Yeah,
That's all
Do
right.
you want to come back, come to the table?
Well, I was just hanging out here because I was letting Mango like chill.
Oh,
But I
okay.
can move if that would be better for folks. I just had a couple questions.
It might be better for the microphones, I don't know.
Is it okay if counselor stays there?
You can move back there.
It's fine.
Wherever you want to go.
The microphones are not picking up very much for those that are
Oh,
online anyway.
okay.
Yeah, that's. Anyway, hi, how's it going? Okay, go back to sleep. I had a question about the creative use that we allowed in the M zone. Where is that use in our code now? Where does that live now?
Yeah, the enemy has creative use, so we copied that definition from the enemy standards that were adopted in 2018.
Okay, and then I know that there are a lot of, like in terms of clustering creative uses, I'm wondering if that could, in the future, accommodate a larger makerspace sort of use?
Yeah, I mean, part of so makerspace kind of fits, depending on what we're making would either fit as creative space or manufacturing and production. So makerspace was actually explicitly something that we talked about as something we would want to encourage.
Because it makes me think a little bit about the evolution of ADX in Portland, the makerspace in Southeast. And that like through COVID, they've now built out more individual suites and offices for folks. Would that be in conflict with the use in the end zone?
I don't think so. Yeah, I mean, we've had this internal conversation too about administering our zoning districts. Right now, let me finish that thought. Administering our zoning districts with multi-tenant spaces. Currently, there's a standard in the M zone that's being maintained from existing that would say you can have any mix of uses as long as you have 25% or more of manufacturing and production. So if they divided it into 10 maker spaces, we would expect 3 of them to be at least manufacturing and production, and then you could have like a creative space would be another one, which I think you can also consider a manufacturing use or at least a production use because you're creating something. The only, I think, real distinction there is whether you're like creating a product to sell or it's like more of a creative act, jewelry making, yarning, those kind of things.
Got it. Okay, that's really helpful. And then I have a question about the BI zone. So the first item that you had mentioned was removing recycling activities. And so I understand that in theory, but I'm also thinking about some of our conversations that we've had about a reuse mall. And that might be one of the only places that we could cite something large like that. So I'm wondering if that would preclude us from, in the future, putting something like a reuse mall into a business industrial zone.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not 100% familiar with the reuse mall, so I could maybe some clarification there, but to be clear, it is currently allowed as an accessory use in the BI zone. And so it would have to have another use associated with it that's like manufacturing or production. That is sort of a primary use. So
I suppose retail could be a secondary use, maybe.
Can I pick up on, I wanted to talk about the recycling one, so can we go on that and then you can come back to whatever else you had?
Sure. I guess it's the same, I'm in the middle of the same question.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
So, but if you have other things that you want to add on to that question, this is a good place to do it because I'm still right in the middle of it.
Well, I guess I'm just like not at all convinced we want to eliminate recycling uses as I think if you've got the design standards where loading is from the back and all of those things, why would we want to eliminate recycling use? And I guess I'm curious as to what motivated that change. And I will tell you, I hear all the time from people who think we should have put the bottle drop in the industrial area and not in a, adjacent to a neighborhood. So tell me what's motivating that.
Yeah, definitely. And you are right. In addition to the service orientation, we also have a prohibition on outdoor storage in the BI zone. So that would be sort of another layer, sort of along your argument. This was a point where staff went back and forth a little bit, but what ultimately the use is sort of an outlier, right, in the zone, and that was why it was sort of proposed to be removed. Sort of inconsistent with the rest of the use types allowed.
So I will say, in the session before you, I don't know how much of that you heard, but we had, we were talking the trash haulers, but there's the Recycling Modernization Act now, which is requiring businesses that produce things to have to deal with the recycling. And somebody recently approached me about, there's some plan there's some potential plan in the works to create these mini recycling depots that are in storage containers or something. Anyway, I mean, Yeah, they were looking to place these shipping containers that are little mini recycling depots in lots of places. They're gonna have to have somewhere to bring those things and sort them and, you know, whatever they're gonna ultimately do with them. I guess I just feel like the Recycling Modernization Act is gonna change some of what's going on, and it's not all gonna be Metro and big haulers. There's probably going to be some mid-size recycling things, and I guess I don't think that's necessarily a bad use.
If I could, maybe then we can rethink the use, and maybe we use development standards or performance standards to kind of help keep it tighter from a recycling standpoint, and it could probably accommodate exactly what you're talking about. I think something that's a bit more inside and not, you know, a big metro model of something like that, and so we kind of figure out a modern recycling kind of situation that way instead.
I think that's a good solution. That kind of gets at what I was leading into, which is I wonder if the Modernization Act would give us the ability to kind of partition our interpretation of recycling into things that would fit and maybe wouldn't fit, and perhaps then the design standards become clear. So, for example, a transfer station is probably not the best use to put in a BI zone, but maybe light gleaning from, you know, like from various transfer stations, and then, or allowing people to drop off some things that would need just light repair or something like that to operate as a reuse model that could actually be more in line with our shared values for that zone.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. And yeah, currently the definition, there is no definition. It just says recycling center. So I think having guardrails could be a good way to sort of accommodate what we're looking for while sort of allowing that possibility of maintaining that still.
I think the recycling is a good indication of, we missed, I think, the first half of what you guys were talking about, but the Recycling Modernization Act, looking into that and seeing what language is included in that, will be kind of what we bring back to you guys.
We also have a local superstar in this area, Liz Start, who's over at Circus and starts sustainability. I don't know if you're watching, you might get a link to this later. I think like sitting down with her and brainstorming some of this could be really dynamic, and we could actually, you know, take what is a challenge and see that as a future opportunity, even one that increases our ability to kind of layer in economic development and entrepreneurialism.
Yeah, certainly.
I think that'd be cool. Mayor, so did you have other questions about recycling? Okay, all right, reclaiming my time. So I had another question about the spaces that have the largest square footage in terms of warehouses in our city are increasingly appealing, I think, to sports use and some entertainment uses. And I'm wondering how that kind of plays in. I'll give you an example. The Rose City Rollers are outgrowing their space down in the hangar. But they have space requirements that they need for, you know, to like be able to move. It would be amazing if we were home to the Rose City Rollers. So I'm wondering if there's something that we need to be aware of in putting these either restrictions or enabling more uses or something like that, that could allow us to kind of position for an opportunity like that in the future.
Yeah, certainly. Currently, I think the BI zone would probably be a better candidate for these kinds of uses since it has larger spaces. And currently in the BI zone, the uses that are outdoor recreation larger than 4,000 square feet are allowed as a conditional use, and we're not proposing a change to that. And so if the Rose City Rollers were interested,
if you're listening,
that would be pretty cool. And what we would be looking at would be a conditional use process.
Okay.
And so I guess all that to say, it wouldn't be a non-starter necessarily, but there would be some process there. And I think, although it would be great to have, I think maintaining some level of process would allow us to sort of be a little discerning in terms of what those uses are still.
Awesome.
Like you have to change your name to Dogwood City Rollers?
Are you talking about recreation in general? Like if somebody wanted to do a bunch of indoor pickleball courts?
Well, yeah, that could be a possibility, or like I've heard a lot recently about like developments down on Main Street.
Yeah.
People are actually saying like, hey, why don't we have an indoor play area for young families to go to? And so then like when you think about what those,
Look
you
like.
know, what the bones of those are, they are big
spaces,
kind of buildings. Yeah, and it would be really amazing to just plug and play, you know, into one of our industrial or business industrial kind of areas, like that'd be amazing.
Yeah.
So I guess my questions are really, you know, there are some dynamic uses that might become useful in the future.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that we're not ruling those out moving forward on these.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, and we are not,
Cool.
yeah, there's no sort of, other than the few that we called out,
We're not proposing to sort of further restrict any of the other uses.
Awesome. And it's good that we've established that we're all Dogwood City Rollers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's important for the record.
Start our
I'll
own
make
team.
this shirt. Rob's probably already on.
I had a question on some of the feedback you got. What,
Yes.
Did the individuals you asked, the businesses you asked, did they say why they wanted to limit retail space in certain areas? Because like I look at International Way, for example, and it's a pretty nice, well-maintained, pretty well, more developed than some of our neighborhoods to walk, right? And I think like I look at that, and every time I drive by and I see some of the saloons or the bars or some of the stuff there, I'm like, you know, this is, especially with the manufacturing kind of tucked behind a lot of that, I'm like, this is kind of a cool spot for when Councilor Anderson was talking about, you know, making King Road more like Division, right? Or like a gaslight district where it would bring more people to, obviously for those businesses that are there. But like, what was the pushback with that? Because I see that as a potential, you know, opportunity for economic growth, because it's also by a busy highway. It's pretty easy to get to because of the thoroughfare that
You're
works.
talking about a more commercial district?
Yeah, like something that was, yeah, like in San Diego, they got the Gaslight District, right? Which is, or Gaslamp District, whatever you call it. And it's just like restaurants, bars and things like that where you can, right? And it's like, it's gotta be, you gotta have the infrastructure, so to speak. And it seems like it has more than other areas, at least more than our neighborhood hubs, for example. And what would be the pushback? What was the pushback to allowing more retail in spaces like that?
I think, to be clear, we didn't necessarily float that, like a change on that scale in terms of how we were discussing the project with businesses, so I don't think that they were necessarily anticipating that.
But in general, what was the
But,
pushback
yeah.
on limiting the retail?
Yeah, I think what we were
spaces?
hearing is that there is not a lot of space. I mean, Dave's Killer Bread, for example, is one of the folks that we talked to, and they have very limited parking, and their employees struggle to get to the space, you know, without taking a car. They also do work overnight, and so like TriMet isn't operating. They've had, unfortunately, people, you know, hit trying to get there, trying to cross the Harmony sort of Linwood intersection. But I think really it's, what we were hearing is that there's not a lot of space in these areas for really a lot of businesses. But I think sort of zooming out a little bit, the broader like lens, allowing those commercial uses, they command higher rents. And so if, you know, I think staff's perspective was kind of coming from a place of understanding that we have a healthy industrial sort of community that we're looking to provide stability to. And we're not looking to, it didn't seem like that we needed to sort of make changes to fill up the space. So I guess all that to say, we didn't quite get to that level of a scope. I'm not sure if that's.
Yeah, no, that
Service
answers.
industry jobs are not high-wage jobs, right? They're not typically family.
Right, but at the same time, you currently have businesses there that, like you mentioned, only get business maybe during the lunch hour, right? So how do we help sustain those businesses and maybe opening up more opportunity to where it's not just an employee district and more like a economic district, or, you know, commerce district, whatever you want to call it, where there's a little bit more activity that happens there. Because it's not, you don't need to sustain the industrial businesses, because the manufacturing, because they're not selling to people. But some of those, like Freeman Barrel House and some of those restaurants, and they still got to make do. And without anything drawing anybody there, I mean, they're only survived by those hours that they work, that the employees support them.
Right, but we are just now getting to the point where our downtown is full. We still haven't filled buildings and still haven't filled Axle Tree.
Right, but we invested in it.
Milwaukie Marketplace still has lots of vacancies, creating more competition to draw from those existing hubs and, whatever other, what we're trying to do on 32nd or whatever in terms of hubs. I mean, that just dilutes that, right?
But I
mean,
guess
there's only
to a certain degree.
There's only so much business for.
What Councilor
You're right off of 224, so you're getting a lot more traffic. You're not just serving Milwaukeeans, because that's a huge transit corridor. So you're not necessarily pulling from downtown, because it's in a different part of the area, right? You're on the other side. So you got to cross 224 to get there. But in order for this to happen, it took investment. Because I also worry, well, what's going to happen? How do we sustain those businesses that are there now?
Well, I was pleasantly surprised by the way these guys started, that the vacancy rate is so low. Because I see signs and it feels to me like there's lots of vacancies, but the vacancy rate's incredibly low. So,
a lot of that has to
so
do
they
with
are being
the investment.
sustained, and we are having some turnover. But I don't think converting it to a commercial district is.
Well, I also
I'm not necessarily saying that, but
it already allows for these like retail spaces to open right now.
Yeah.
And so it's not like we would have to, what you're describing, I think is kind of already allowed, but to the mayor's point, the market isn't really bearing out those conversions happening right now, unless I'm.
Yeah, I'm not, and again, I'm just looking at, like, how do you bring more foot traffic to an area that's manufacturing when you have businesses there too, right? Because you have to do something, like Freeman's Barrel House, we were just talking about it. If they're not getting business outside the employees that work there, I mean, just because downtown's flourishing doesn't mean other parts shouldn't or can't. And the main reason a lot of this is moving is because we invested in that. It's not like it's happening organically, really. We've given out so much money in terms of business development loans, which are happening, right?
But we're not giving them out on.
Not there, right? Not there. I'm saying here, right? And then Milwaukie Marketplace, once new season got in, that was a draw for other businesses to show up too. So a lot of it is from promotion of the city and also the investment that the city's been doing. But I don't want to forget about those businesses who are only sustained during lunchtime, because they still need to.
Well, I mean, that's why I definitely recommended Milwaukie.
Yeah.
But I guess to me, the answer is not adding more competition for them.
Well, it doesn't have to necessarily become, retail is retail. Like, I'm not saying open a bar across the street from Freeman's Barrel House, that's not gonna help. But something that's gonna draw people, like Councilor Stavanger just talked about the Rose City Rollers. What competition are they gonna be for restaurants? So something like that would bring people to that area, that would make people wanna go there. Because right now, nobody wants to go there because they're just, it's manufacturing. You go there to work. So that's what I'm saying. I guess more like what could be a draw that would bring to that locale that could help those businesses survive outside of lunch.
Well, I feel like this is a bigger conversation than this code package.
Yeah, it's just something to think about. Just
Maybe something
planting
we
the
should
seed,
have
put
in
it
the
out there.
context of our goal,
Yeah.
of our ED goal. Talking to somebody, maybe an expert, to talk about right-sizing zones and where you create, because I think this also has come up with hubs. It might be good to have somebody with that business expertise to come talk to us. I feel like we're conflating these guys' kind of limited project into a much bigger.
That's okay.
And just looking at the time, we are 5 over, so do you, staff, feel like you got direction on the questions that you needed?
Yeah, I think that we have what we need. Yeah.
I feel like we cut Councilor Stavanger off. Did you get?
Oh, no, I
through
got all my questions.
You
Yeah.
did? Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, I just want to say that I'm really glad that we're doing this because, we've been knee-deep in housing for the last 5 or 6 years. And I've often thought that, businesses, and especially the more industrialized businesses kind of were maybe a bit of an afterthought and that kind of thing. So I'm really appreciative of this, bringing this up. Not that, housing's still important, but we want to give the businesses some TLC as well. Yeah.
Well, and to that end, I wanted to say we had talked in our ED goal about trying to convene some business roundtables in some of these areas. And it sounds like you guys have already been talking to some businesses. I don't know how many, but maybe this code chain package is a thing around which to try to convene a business roundtable. So that might be a conversation to have with Joseph and Sierra, but I just want to put that idea out there.
Do you mean in addition to the hearings that would be?
Yeah, before hearings, before we got to hearings, before we got to a final package. Yeah, I mean,
We
I
could
would
talk to Joseph and Sierra about maybe having something in advance of the code package.
Yeah.
So that we're kind of talking about it all summer.
Yeah.
For you. Will and Matthew, nice job. Very good first foray work session.
Not half as scary as you said they were going to be.
Way to have some more questions.
Honeymoon's over.
Yes, we are adjourned.
We're adjourned.
We'll be back at 6.
If I overdo it, then it's great. Like that's the point.